Lieutenant Arik Solon trudged across the ashen wastes of Titan's caldera, each labored step sending plumes of crimson dust into the sickly yellow sky. His exosuit's servomotors whined in protest, warning of fraying circuitry and imminent power failure. Even the helmet's heads-up display flickered, overlaying radiation spikes and noxious gas pockets in strobing red. He'd lost count of how many times he'd performed this patrol, scouring the moon for survivors, for supplies, anything to stave off the endless slaughter that raged back on the front lines. Beneath his visor, Arik's reflection stared back at him. Gaunt features, a jitter of gray at the temples, eyes like hollowed coals. He remembered a different war, one fought in the green fields of Earth where children still laughed in the distance. That world was gone now, consumed by mechanized hordes and the ceaseless march of terraforming machines. Here, on Titan, the Coalition's mining corporations had carved away at the moon's crust, while the Allied resistance waged guerrilla raids in the dust-choked canyons. Each side claimed righteousness. Neither spared the innocent. A flicker on the motion tracker caught Arik's attention. At first he assumed it was a stray piece of debris stirred by the radioactive winds. But the next blip solidified into 4 distinct signatures, large, warm, and moving against the gale. He froze, hand tightening on the adaptive rifle strapped to his back. Protocol dictated that any unidentified life form be classified as hostile, yet protocol had died with his squad. He followed the signals down into a ravine, its walls scarred by past skirmishes. Here, the wind died to a whisper, the ground beneath. His boots shifted from dust to cracked cobalt blue stone. And there, half buried in the rubble, lay the first of them, a dragon. Even reclined, it towered over Arik, its scales a mesmerizing swirl of white and pale sapphire, as though sculpted from living ice. From its snout rose a curling ribbon of frost, dispersing into delicate motes that glittered in the dim light. Arik's rifle hovered at his side. His breath caught when the dragon raised its head, revealing eyes the color of deep glaciers. They regarded him not with malice, but with exhaustion so profound it mirrored his own. Taut sinews rippled beneath their crystalline hides. Each shallow breath rasped like wind across frozen plains. Around this first dragon crouched 3 others, smaller but no less majestic, their bodies scarred with burns and lacerations that seeped faint trails of phosphorescent fluid. He swallowed. Every instinct screamed, kill or be killed, yet his finger stayed off the trigger. Years of combat had honed him into a weapon, but he could not bring himself to fire on creatures that shivered with more weariness than any human soldier. Instead, he crouched low, exosuit joints protesting the motion, and offered a slow, open-palmed gesture, a universal sign of peace, or so he hoped. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the largest dragon inhaled, sending a cloud of crystalline vapor between them. Arik tasted a sudden freshness on the wind, as if he'd stepped into a winter storm on Earth. The vapor punched through the helmet's filters, clearing away toxins stamped by mining machinery. His HUD recalibrated, and for the first time in hours he breathed deeply without alarm. He spoke, voice rough through the comlink, "I'm not here to fight." To his surprise, the dragon tilted its head and let out a low, resonant hum, an almost musical tone that thrummed through Arik's bones. Spines along its neck glowed in time with the hum, pulsing a soft azure light. He reached out, palm trembling, and the dragon lowered its muzzle until its muzzle brushed his gauntlet. A jolt like electricity surged through him. Images bloomed behind his eyelids, a world of ice fields stretching to a violet horizon. Massive, crystalline spires piercing the heavens, and eggs, dozens of them, nestled in a basin of frozen vapor. Then chaos, rolling firestorms, an invading armada of sleek metal vessels and dragons fleeing across an alien tundra. Arik staggered back, heart hammering. The dragon's hum faded and the spell broke. He straightened, adrenaline flooding his veins. In that moment he understood 2 truths. First, these were not mere beasts, but sentient beings, refugees of a cosmic calamity. Second, they had chosen him, a lone soldier discarded by his own. people, as their only hope. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a reminder that the Coalition's patrols would not abandon their hunt. Yet in the hush of the ravine, Arik made a decision. He would lead these majestic creatures to safety, at whatever risk to himself. For the first time in years, he felt purpose rekindle in his chest. The war might never end, but here, in the Ur, hollow of Titan's surface, a fragile alliance was born, one that would turn the tide of despair into something altogether unexpected. Hope. Arik led the dragons deeper into the labyrinth of Titan's shattered crust, clutching his adaptive rifle in one hand and a small glowing beacon in the other. The beacon pulsed with soft orange light, an improvised signal he'd jury-rigged to warn him if any Coalition drones drew near. Above him, the sky churned with radioactive storms, but below, the ravine widened into a cavernous hollow, its walls streaked with cobalt veins that pulsed faintly in the gloom. This was as close to shelter as he could find. The largest dragon, its frosted snout nicked and cracked from battle, lowered its flank and exhaled a gentle plume of mist. The vapor drifted across the cavern floor, where it crystallized into a thin sheet of shimmering ice. As Arik navigated the slippery ground, the other 3 dragons fanned out, their tails sweeping the dust aside and flattening jagged stones into a smoother path. Their movements were precise and coordinated, as though they had traversed this subterranean realm countless times before. When they reached the cavern's heart, Arik activated a small scanner on his wrist. The readouts confirmed that the radiation here was only a fraction of the levels on the surface, and the faint hum of geothermal vents promised a modicum of warmth. He set down his pack and began unpacking medical patches, nutrient bars, and water canisters. The dragons watched curiously, their sapphire eyes reflecting the soft glow of his supplies. He tore open a bar of dense, protein-rich rations and offered a piece. One of the smaller dragons sniffed it cautiously, then snapped it between razor-sharp teeth. Its tail flicked in approval. Arik took a seat against a smooth rock wall. He peeled off his helmet to let the recycled air kiss his face, and the dragons closed the circle around him. Their bodies radiated a gentle cold that mingled with the cavern's warmth, creating a comfortable balance. He applied Medigel to the largest dragon's wing, tending to a burn that oozed iridescent fluid. The creature huffed softly, leaning into his touch, and Arik felt the first twinge of trust bloom between them. As the minutes stretched, he realized the dragons communicated not with words, but with shimmering pulses of light that danced along their spines. Curious, he pressed his hand against the scale of the wounded dragon. The creature's light pulses slowed, then coalesced into faint patterns, rhythmic sequences that he slowly decoded as basic images. Fractured crystal spires, a rift in the sky and a burning horizon. He responded by tapping out his own pattern, a small circle for I, a larger circle for we, and a broken line for lost. The dragon's glow brightened, then dimmed in turn. Though they could not yet speak the same tongue, they had begun to share meaning. With the Coalition patrols still searching above, Arik knew their reprieve would be brief. Yet here, in this hollow sanctuary, human and dragon forged their first bond. Together, they would learn to trust each other's strengths, his cunning, their elemental power, and perhaps carve out a path to safety in a universe grown too vast and too cruel for any one species to endure alone. The calm of the cavern had barely settled when Arik's beacon flared red. Movement overhead, dozens of heat signatures converging on their location. His heart thudded as he sprang to his feet, slinging the adaptive rifle into position. The dragons mirrored his urgency, their scales tensing like drawn bows. Arik dashed to the cavern mouth and peered up. 4 hovercraft, their underbellies bristling with pulse cannons, drifted low against the swirling orange sky. Spotlights swept the ravine, carving fiery paths across the rocky walls. Coalition scouts, relentless as scavengers, were determined to claim the dragons as trophies, or worse, to destroy any evidence of their existence. He counted off silently. 4. Weapons primed. 2 o'clock. In response, the dragons angled their massive heads, the crystalline ridges along their spines glowing a pale luminescence. With a guttural rumble that resonated through the rock, the largest of them, a matriarch, Auric later sensed, arched her neck and exhaled a plume of mist so dense it swallowed the cavern's entrance. Tiny ice crystals formed in midair, blanketing the ravine's mouth in a shifting curtain of frost. The scout pilot stalled, thrusters whining as their sensors scrambled. Auric seized the moment. Now! He fired a volley of micro-missiles at the nearest hovercraft, each warhead punching grooves into its armor. The dragon at his side matched him, beat for beat, its tail swiping a boulder into the second craft's path, sending it spiraling into the dust. The other two dragons flared their wings, sending gusts of frigid wind that ricocheted off the rock walls and buffeted the remaining vessels. But the coalition machines adapted quickly. An automated drone detached from the lead hovercraft and dove down, weapons charging to ionize the dragon's crystalline armor. Auric cursed and sprinted toward the fallen boulder. He jammed the beacon against his helmet, broadcasting an EMP pulse. The drone's circuitry sparked and went dark, mere seconds before it could unleash a devastating volley. As Auric turned back, he saw the dragons gathering strength. Their spines pulsed in rapid succession, each pulse resonating as a note in a larger ancient song. The cavern trembled as they inhaled deeply, summoning the latent chill within their icy cores. When they exhaled, the frigid blast exploded outward in a cascading wave of frost that coated the ground, the rock, even the sky itself. The third hovercraft overrode autopilot, banking sharply to escape, only to skitter off balance as its thrusters iced over. It tipped and crashed into the ravine wall in a shower of sparks. The fourth broke formation, its engines groaning beneath the strain, and retreated into the storm above. Silence reclaimed the cavern once more. Auric's chest heaved. His hands shook as he lowered his rifle. The dragons, too, seemed drained, the glow along their spines flickering like dying embers. Yet in their eyes he saw something new. Confidence. The spark of victory over an enemy that had once seemed invincible. He approached the matriarch, voice hoarse but triumphant. "You did it. We did it." She lowered her head and pressed her frosted muzzle against his chest plate. The contact sent a gentle pulse through his suit, an echo of the bond they'd forged back in the ravine. The smaller dragons circled behind, nudging each other in playful relief, their scales clinking like chimes in a winter breeze. Auric surveyed the wreckage, a scorched hovercraft, a smoldering drone, and footprints in frost leading toward deeper shadows. They had won this skirmish, but the coalition would not stay away for long. "We need to move," he muttered. "There must be a safer haven, someplace they can't find you." The dragons responded with a chorus of light pulses, short, rhythmic flickers that Auric interpreted as a scent. Together they would follow the frozen trails of Titan's underworld, seeking the hidden sanctuaries whispered of in draconic memory. As they departed into the gloom, Auric glanced back once more at the ravine's icy mouth. In the dim glow, he saw the faint imprint of dragon wings against the storm, a promise that, even in the depths of pursuit, hope could blaze brighter than any weapon. The morning light that filtered into the cavern was a ghostly green, refracted through swirling toxic clouds high above Titan's surface. Auric roused the dragons from their rest, and together they ascended toward the crater rim. Every step he took was mirrored by careful footfalls on crystalline scales, and with each, their unspoken understanding deepened. At the lip of the crater, Auric paused to catch his breath. He activated the holo projector built into his wrist comm link and summoned a fading memory. Rivers of blue water snaking through emerald forests on Earth, children chasing kites beneath a bright sun, laughter drifting in warm air. The dragons gathered close, their spines pulsing in gentle synchrony as they absorbed the images. Then, one by one, they extended their necks and pressed crystalline snouts to the projector's light. Visions bloomed in Auric's mind. Endless, white plains stretching to a violet horizon, towering spires of ice pulsing with cold energy, and, most wondrous of all, egg-shaped pods nestled in frost-laden alcoves like precious gemstones. He felt the wonder that had filled their race when the eggs first hatched, and the horror of the cataclysm that shattered their world piece by piece. When the visions receded, Arik opened his mouth to speak, but found his voice choked with emotion. The dragons answered by weaving light pulses along their spines, patterns he now recognized as their own language. The matriarch's glow spelled out a single word in his mind: pact. Arik swallowed and tapped out his response in the code he'd devised back in the ravine. Friend, protector. A ripple of bright white light raced down each dragon's back. Their bond was sealed. Turning from the rim, Arik laid out their plan. Deep beneath Titan's ice-crusted crust lay a network of abandoned smuggler tunnels, old Allied escape routes that the Coalition had long since forgotten. There the dragons could shield themselves from orbital scans and patrols, and there they would conceal the last surviving egg, the future of their species. He outlined the path on a worn star map he carried, tracing tunnels that would thread them beneath the frozen seas to a hollow chamber marked only by a frozen obelisk. Their eyes glowed eagerly at the drawing. Arik felt a surge of hope. For the first time since the war began, he was not just surviving, he was building a future. As they descended into the first tunnel, the walls closed in around them, jagged ice and stone glinting in the dim glow of their combined light. Matriarch lifted her wing and gently lowered a small crystalline shard into Arik's hand, an anchor of dragon essence to guide them home should he ever stray. He slipped it into his suit's chest pocket, chest tightening with gratitude. Together, human and dragons, they ventured into the silent veins of Titan, bound by a shared purpose, to protect what remained of hope itself. The narrow tunnel gave way to a vast echoing chamber. Ice-coated walls arched overhead like the ribcage of some ancient leviathan, bathed in the pale green glow of bioluminescent crystals. Stalactites of frozen methane dripped from the ceiling, hissing softly as they met the ice floor. At the far end stood the monolithic obelisk Arik had studied on his star map, a towering pillar of pure veined ice that pulsed with an inner light. Beneath it, nestled in a shallow basin, lay the dragon's last egg, smooth and iridescent, no larger than Arik's forearm, yet radiating a life force that hummed through the cavern. Arik knelt beside the basin, reverent. The dragons gathered, behind him forming a protective half-circle. The matriarch lowered her head until her snout hovered inches above the egg, and her pulsing spines flared brilliant white. Then she exhaled a gentle cloud of crystalline vapor that settled over the egg's surface, sealing it in a translucent shell of frost, meant to shield it from any who might seek to harm it. As the vapor cleared, a low hum rose from the obelisk, resonating in frequencies that matched the dragon's heartbeats. Arik realized with awe that the chamber itself was alive, an ancient sanctuary built by the dragon's ancestors, attuned to their biochemistry and capable of sustaining their kind. The obelisk's light intensified, casting dancing prisms across the walls, and Arik felt warmth creep into his bones despite the frigid air. Suddenly, the ground tremored, far above, through a fissure in the ceiling. A beam of golden sunlight pierced the gloom, an unexpected crack in Titan's always stormy sky. The beam struck the obelisk's apex, and the entire pillar exploded in a cascade of refracted light, sending tendrils of luminous energy snaking through the chamber. The dragons roared in unison, their voices amplifying the obelisk's song. Arik braced himself as a wave of pure resonance washed over him, and in that moment, he was flooded with memory. Visions of the dragon's homeworld in its prime. Crystalline, forests grown from living ice, cities carved into glimmering glaciers, and dragons soaring beneath twin suns. When the resonance subsided, Arik staggered to his feet. The egg's frost shell had cracked, and at its center lay a hatchling no bigger than a human child but with eyes like molten sapphire. It blinked up at him, its wings quivering as it tested them for the first time. At that precise moment, the matriarch pressed her wing against Arik's shoulder, and he felt a rush of fate and promise. The dragon's next move, resurrecting their species, had begun. Yet there was no time for celebration. From the tunnel entrance came the distant thunder of coalition artillery, each boom rippling through the ice. Scout sensors had tracked Orcs' comm beacon despite its EMP cloak, and reinforcements were coming. He grabbed the hatchling, cradling it against his armor. "Stay close," he whispered, though he knew it was as much a vow to himself as to the newborn. The dragons stirred, their scales glowing with renewed vigor. The tunnels behind them offered a labyrinth of escape routes, but Arik understood this was their stand. Drawing his rifle, he moved to the cavern's mouth. "I'll hold them off," he said, voice steady. "Get the hatchling and the egg out of here." The dragons responded with a surge of light that coursed through Arik's suit, strengthening his arms and quickening his pulse. He stepped into the tunnel's threshold. Beyond, phosphorescent footprints of his winged allies marked the path to freedom. Above, through the massive fissure, Titan storm clouds swirled in electric violet. As the first armored foot soldiers rounded the bend, Arik raised his weapon and felt for the first time in years calm conviction. He was no longer just a soldier, he was guardian of a new dawn. Behind him the dragons moved as one, a living avalanche of ice and light, carrying the hopes of their entire race into the hidden veins of Titan. And Arik Solon, war-weary no more, stood ready to forge legend, with claw and rifle, ensuring that the Icy White Dragon's next move would echo across the stars.